be good for all of us to share someone now at some point. So Rich, if you might.
Yeah, thank you. And Mauna Kea is always a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best here, which is I chose to open the meeting.
Good for all of us to share someone now at some point. So Rich, if you might.
Yeah, thank you. And Mauna Kea is always a tough act. I'm getting I'll do my best here. I chose to open the meeting.
Getting feedback from the live stream.
Yeah, getting a weird feedback. Is it okay now? Okay, I'll go try. You guys can hear me? Okay, so I chose to open the meeting today with a Olelo Noeau, which comes from Mary Kavena Pukui's book about Hawaiian proverbs and poetical sayings. And I find these sayings to be very meaningful and instructive in guiding us. And it really sort of, to me, transmits in a brief way, but deep way, Hawaiian cultural values and thought. I was thinking back to the Mauna Kea working group, and we have some members in attendance here as well, that a key moment for us was the principle of putting the Mauna in the middle and caring for the Mauna as our central purpose. So I chose to share Olelo No'ea, which is number 531 in the book. He ali'i ka aina he kaua ke kanaka. The land is chief, man is its servant. And I think this speaks to that idea of putting the Mauna in the middle. So just maybe we could reflect on that. And thank you for the opportunity, John. I think it's a great idea that we take turns doing this. Mahalo.
Wow, Rich, thanks for sharing. But it's always a good reminder for us to get grounded before we start. So at this point, I do not believe that we have any community or public comments. Is that correct for you?
Correct.
All right. With that, we've circulated the minutes from our March 9th meeting. Are there any amendments or changes to the minutes? If not, if I could get a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from last month.
And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are adopted. As part of the chair report, you've all seen the press release and the comments that are, or the coverage that has come out about the CSO decommissioning status. But I thought it would be a good idea that we invited Dr. Gowala to present to us and allow you guys to ask questions about the decommissioning process. Is very, very complex and very, it's almost an engineering marvel that they're going to be able to take down the mirror. But maybe with that, Dr. Gowala, if you might explain to us what's going to be done. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few slides. Let me make sure. Could you please enable screen sharing for me? It's still disabled. Okay. Okay, let's put this into this. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the presenter slides. Okay, so I have a couple of slides just to remind you of the plans for CSO decommissioning, and then I'll briefly update you on the status. Okay, so I'll just remind you, remember the preferred alternative is complete removal of all structures and the full restoration of the site as closely as possible to pre-construction condition. And as of now, we know of no obstacles to doing that. As you know, in the environmental assessment and the CDUP, there are alternatives in case we run into surprises as we do the decommissioning, but this is the preferred alternative and is our plan. As you also know, a variety of best management practices will be implemented regarding traffic and vehicle use, management of the materials and the waste, limiting ground disturbance, taking measures to prevent erosion or any pollution of water quality. There'll be efforts to protect invasive species during the deconstruction process, of course, appropriate safety and accident prevention, inspection of equipment and materials. In terms of monitoring, there's a number of monitors that are required by the Mauna Kea Comprehensive Management Plan. We have an independent decommissioning construction monitor. So this is the person who has the authority to stop work at the site if they see anything that's concerning, anything that violates best management practices. They report to effectively us as well as the CMS currently. We have an archaeological monitor who will be present for any ground disturbing activity to look for unexpected archaeological sites. We did do an archaeological survey prior to the decommissioning, and no archaeological sites were identified, but of course, there may be unidentified sites, so that will ensure that we take appropriate measures should any excavations identify any sites. A cultural monitor will of course be present also for any ground disturbing activity, and as well as to orient the decommissioning contractors as they enter the site and understand how to undertake their task with appropriate respect. And then of course there'll be an invasive species monitor. That person will both inspect vehicles that will be coming up to participate in deconstruction, and they will also do regular surveys of the site to look for invasive species. I'll note two deviations from the site decommissioning plan that have been accepted by DLNR. So we are, there had originally been a plan to place the construction trailer at the batch plant. However, by removing the outbuildings at the start, we can put those construction trailers on the main site, and that will both reduce our footprint and also improve convenience for the work. And then there had been a plan to remove what we deemed to be a good amount of fill material that was used on the site. However, review of the topography by the contractor suggested that there may be great uncertainty in the amount of material that is fill, and that instead we should take the measure of trying to retain the existing topography and instead obviously treat it so it looks like the natural topography of the site, but not remove an extensive amount of fill given the uncertainties in the topography. So let me pause there. Let me see if there are any questions about the plans for decommissioning, and then I can give you a quick update on the telescope removal and the calendar.
Hi, aloha. I have a quick question. So I was actually a cultural consultant on decommissioning here, and I know. So I just want to check in if when you're referring to some of the how would you put it there, the fill. I know one of the concerns that came up was that they found that in the original construction, the concrete had actually penetrated down through a number of cracks into the lava. And the question was, do we leave the concrete or do we try to extract it? And the concern being that it would actually create more damage to try and actually get that concrete that went down into crevices. And so I gave a recommendation and I suggested that they consult with others as well. This was about 3 years ago. And I didn't hear back or I wasn't able to track onto what the final decision was on that. But that was one of the concerns that was brought to me. And so I was wondering, is that what you're referring to as the fill? Is that also that concrete that had penetrated down further into the crevices?
Right. Okay. So first of all, we have no evidence that on this site that's happened. Also, it is believed based on the topographical surveys that the foundation of the telescope. So the foundation of the CSO is fairly shallow. The central telescope foundation is only about 5 or 6 feet deep. The deepest penetration is actually for the cesspool. We believe that the foundation was actually placed on top of fill, not on lava. So we don't expect that there will be penetration of concrete from the foundation down into the lava. Of course, we'll evaluate that as we are excavating, and if we find surprises, then we will have to obviously consult and decide how to go forward. But the expectation is that there won't be any there. For the cesspool, that was a concrete form that was put in as a piece, not poured. So that also should not, even though it does sit in a region that was excavated from the lava, it's not expected that that there would be any concrete flow into the lava because it wasn't poured in place. It was a form that was put in after being poured. So we don't expect that those issues will arise, but as part of the process of excavating, and we've already committed to doing testing of the material underneath the foundation and underneath the cesspool, we'll be able to inspect that. And if we identify any surprises such as concrete going into the lava below, then we will consult with CMS or it's whoever is appropriate at that time to see how to deal with that. But as of now, we have no expectations that will have happened.
Okay, I just, if I can, just for the record, just note then my little concern of having served on the decommissioning or advising the decommissioning and having that brought to my attention a couple years ago, it appears that it's reported differently currently today because that was a concern brought up and now seems to be being reported differently. So just for the record, I just want that mentioned.
I think perhaps some clarification is required. Maybe I'm not understanding what you're referring to. I don't believe we at any point indicated that we expected that there would be penetration of concrete into the lava.
Well, this was again about 2 or 3 years ago, back when Peter was working on Peter Young, I believe his last name was part of this. And again, this is one of those concerns that was brought to me as a cultural advisor to this decommissioning plan. And so I'm just, for myself too, I just want to make note that that was brought to our attention. That was a big discussion. That the question being that as it was brought up at that point, that concrete had possibly penetrated down into a little further down, and the whole concern was, and it was quite an odd thing as to what would be more culturally appropriate, which would be, do we dig more and actually do more damage to try and remove this extra concrete, or do we cover it and just cap it? Of course, there is no cultural appropriateness to that at all. So I'm just saying that, so something seems to be off, in my opinion, the fact that this was something that was brought up a couple of years ago to now being a point of that there isn't. So with that being true, I guess my final thought is that, as you said, to the contractor's recommendation, just to not extract a lot of this fill, but just to make it appear to match the surrounding areas, that is now basically a cosmetic cover up. And just in my personal, I'm going to foreknote too that that is not actual in a return to natural state. It is a compromise to that, and just to recognize that.
Yeah, the difficulty is that because of literally the uncertainty on the measurements, it's difficult to know precisely what the ground contours were prior to the construction of the facility. So that's why this recommendation was made, that we simply don't feel we can confidently return the grade to precisely what it was beforehand. And so then, in the vein of trying to do the least damage possible, to try to not do that.
Mahalo, and I absolutely agree with you. And I just want to make a note again, and this is something that we are to consider in the futures, as this is now also for me a prime example model of why the laws of conservation would prohibit something that is unable to fulfill the process of returning back to natural state.
Okay.
Other questions? Let me just, Doctor, any other questions at this point?
I have a question, but I think I'll wait for Dr. Gowala to finish up, and then I just have some thoughts.
Okay, well, anybody else? Okay, Dr. Gowala.
Okay, so then let me just comment on the schedule. So we have a contract with Goodfellow Brothers that is now, we believe, it was just sent out for final signatures. So that's in place for the decommissioning. And then we are completing the preparations for the telescope removal. We've had some delays there due to surprises on some of the fixturing for the removal, and also our expectations of the work required to obtain the road permits was less than actually turned out. So we've been working on that, but we anticipate getting the road permit soon. You've seen the press releases about the road closures that will be associated with the move of the telescope from the summit to the harbor for ship out. So we haven't provided dates yet because we're not completely certain of dates, but we wanted to provide motorists with ample warning of these road closures. The road closures on the major roads, so DKI, et cetera, those will be at nighttime and will be intended to avoid, minimize the impact on the public. The Mauna Kea access road closures will be during the daytime, but of course the traffic on the Mauna Kea access road is much less than on the major public roads. So we will again be putting out press releases and information via public media as those dates firm up, and we can be more precise about that. And I will leave it there and see if there are further questions.
Could you real briefly explain the complexity of taking it down from the summit down to the visitor, that middle route?
Yeah, so the challenge is twofold. One is that we would like to take the primary reflector of the telescope, which is 10 meters, 34 feet in diameter. We'd like to take it out as one piece. This is what you do with an optical telescope, and we actually want to do that for this telescope too, because it will preserve the shape as best as possible. And of course, bringing something that large down the summit access road is difficult. We have a special fixture that allows us to change the angle that the telescope sits at, depending on where we are. So there's as you know, there are a number of switchbacks on the summit access road that would require bringing the telescope to nearly vertical so that we can clear the sides of the road there. But then the bulk of the path will be having the telescope at horizontal. So also the washboarding on the summit road requires that we take extreme care in bringing the telescope down and make sure that it doesn't receive any accelerations that will damage it. So the trip down will probably be at the speed of as slow as a mile an hour. And so it will take a better part of a day to get from the summit to the visitor center. And then the next morning will be the trip from the visitor center down to the DKI intersection. And then we'll hold there near the intersection until a specified date a date that we specified ahead of time, where we'll do a nighttime trip. Partway to Kauai High, we will have a stopover at a contractor yard that's near the Waikoloa Road, Queen Kahumana Highway intersection. And then on a second night, we'll make the remainder of the trip from that yard to the Kauai High port. And the public roads will be partially closed during that trip because the load is so wide. We really are concerned that oncoming traffic could be, it could be a danger to oncoming traffic, and it could be a danger to the telescope to have oncoming traffic. So some sections of the roads will be closed during transit, either partially opposite direction traffic or completely, so that we can safely bring the telescope through. So it'll be essentially a 4-day process, 2 nights, 2 days, and it'll be spread out because we have to allow for the fact that we can't predict the weather at the summit, but for the public road transit, we have to do that on specified days. So there'll be an extended period of time where the telescope may be staged near the DKI access road intersection so that we can wait for the permitted day to travel on the public roads.
Amana.
Yes, mahalo. And sorry, people mispronounce my name all the time, but so I hope I get yours right, Dr. Gowala. Thank you for your work and presentation. I think this is very important to get through this decommissioning process. And so I think some of my questions are just understanding how important it is to try to return the site back to as close as we can as the original state. And also at the same time, there haven't been too many decommissioning processes, at least to my knowledge, in the past. In your folks' work and process, have you reviewed previous decommissioning processes, and is there anything that we've learned from best practices up until this point?
Well, certainly in terms of decommissionings on the summit of Mauna Kea, I think the only one that one could possibly point to was the Air Force telescope, but that was so long ago that would serve as a very poor example. So we to some extent started from scratch and tried to take every measure possible to ensure that we are returning the site as best as possible to its natural state and taking all measures to minimize any, prevent any further damage to the summit. But they're really, I mean, there just aren't examples. We feel like in the process of doing this, we effectively wrote the manual on how to do a decommissioning.
I see. So in other places in the world where there are ground-based telescopes, there haven't been decommissions that we can kind of look at.
None have the level of I think, complexity as this site. I think there just aren't. We asked about this early on. We tried to do a little bit of searching, and almost certainly telescopes have been decommissioned, but not from sites as sensitive as the summit of Mauna Kea. So,
Nice.
and also, just it seemed best to focus on what the local expectations were and what the cultural environment of this site is, rather than worrying too much about analogs to other sites.
I see. And Hoku Kea is sort of in the process of decommissioning also. Is there communication between, your folks and their entity in terms of learning? Like you said, we haven't done this very much. And I think we're going to learn some significant things in this processes. And I'm really wanting just communication and sharing of information. And when we finish, some evaluation in terms of developing overall best practices from these examples. So have you been working with Hoku Kea, or are these two separate sort of decommissioning processes?
There's been no significant direct communication, but we have over 1,000 pages of documentation of what we've done available via our website and via the CMS website. So essentially everything that we learned in terms of what results we got from surveys, what would be best practices for deconstruction, that's in our public documentation. So we feel that that's probably the best reference we can provide. I would say it's hard to think of anything that we learned that isn't in the public documentation. Even one of the challenges working in Hawaii is identifying contractors who can do the various steps of the work for you, the surveys, et cetera. So having those reports available at least provides other decommissionings with some idea about which firms are able to do the work and the quality of the work. And if asked, we can obviously provide the names of the contractors that we solicited bids from. But I think the community is small enough that these are already well-known firms. And so it just didn't seem like there was, aside from our public documentation, I don't think there's a whole lot of additional information that we can convey to Hoku Kea or other decommissionings.
Okay.
Well,
I
if I
guess
can
I'm
add,
wondering about, sorry, Bonnie, a couple more
Yeah.
questions. I guess I'm wondering, Dr. Goel, is just now that we're at this phase where physical decommissioning will actually be happening, are the monitors going to be documenting that processes, or, we're hoping everything goes smoothly, but I feel like there's also some documentation and learning that we need to gain until it's actually achieved, and then kind of assess what were the lessons learned there. And then I have one final question, Bonnie, and then I can yield my time.
I believe the IDCM is charged with logging every day the activities, and then so that will provide a log event, the day-to-day activities. I think any surprises that we find there'll be consultation with CMS. There'll probably need to be approvals from various bodies if we need to diverge from the site decommissioning plan. So I think there'll be ample documentation of that in terms of reports. So I think it really depends a little bit on what we find. If everything goes according to plan, the site decommissioning plan already provides extensive documentation of how we're doing things. And then it'll be if there are revisions required, that additional documentation will be required. There is, I'll remind you that as part of the phase 2 sampling and analysis plan, we are planning to sample underneath the foundations and the cesspool once the concrete is removed. So those results will be reported and made public. So I think you will have everything that we learned in the process will become part of the public record.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for this undertaking, and you know, I think it's a very significant step. And I think lastly, I just wanted to sort of from a management standpoint, you know, just thinking for the entire authority to think through, you know, like as we're thinking of future management balancing, you know, multiple interests and Kuleana of Mauna Kea, for instance, this is an important thing that absolutely needs to happen. And at the same time, you know, we can see, you know, just this undertaking, you know, because of the scale and the magnitude and the amount of activity that needs to take place up there, we will have to probably shut down the road. Cultural access will be limited for multiple days, right? And it's just a function of what needs to happen. And at the same time, you know, I think for the board to remember in the future, these are some of the challenges, right? And when we have this kind of level of infrastructure, you know, for instance, I'm not sure we would shut down the summit from astronomy for cultural access reasons. I'm not sure that's happened in the history of the management regime, but it happens regularly on the other side. So fully supportive of this and appreciate your work, Dr. Gowala. Just trying to think through as a steward and as a trustee, you know, some of the management challenges in here, and really look forward to learning from this process. And what will become of that you know, the optic that you're going to take down as a single feature? Is it going to go and be utilized somewhere else or recycled in some capacity?
Yeah, so the telescope itself is being moved to Chile at a site that we have access to there, so it will be reused. The observatory buildings will not. They are too large and too out of date to move in that fashion, so they will be deconstructed and the materials recycled as best as possible. But the telescope itself will be reused. I can also comment on your question about the traffic. So we did do a traffic management plan. It's part of the public documentation, and you can see that the bulk of the this gives you an idea of the number of trips. The only road closures that will be associated are during the mobilization of the crane and the office trailer. So the standard sort of up and down on a regular basis to bring deconstructed materials to recycling and landfill will not require road closures. So road closure will be very minimal. I think probably just a couple for the crane and the office trailer to go up.
I see. For a couple of days or several hours?
I would think that this would be two instances of a few hours at most.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
And I
Hey,
can't recall.
Bonnie, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I was actually just going to add to Sunil's answer to your question, Kamana, about the communication between CSO and Hokukea, UH Hilo's telescope. First of all, the Hokukea facility is much smaller. The instrument is not in it anymore, so it's not going to be quite the same production. But the UH team, through which CSO has submitted all of its documentation, has informed us of what they're doing. We then communicate to the Hokukea folks, and through the medium of CMS, the UH Mauna Kea group that we discuss things regularly, as well as the Mauna Kea Management Board. So while there may not be direct CSO to UH Hilo communication, these other groups have served as a nexus for sharing information back and forth. So we really are trying to learn what we can. And things like what Lanakila brought up are always part of that preliminary conversation, right? If we're going to take everything out, are we actually doing more harm than if we were to leave some things in place? And that is one of the major conversations we have on these decommissioning projects, because we don't want to do further damage if we can avoid it. But there is robust communication. It's just through these mediators, if you will.
Got it. Thank you, Bonnie. And the question wasn't to, throw anyone under the bus or anything. It's just to understand the processes and how we can develop as a team, as an authority, sort of the best decommissioning practices for Mauna Kea, since this hasn't been done before. So thank you. Glad to know that the communication is happening through these third-party channels.
Other questions, comments? Umay?
Aloha. Mahalo nui, Dr. Gowala, for joining us today, and especially for sharing with us the sensible and the controlled decommissioning plan that is being put before us. I do want to just follow up on what both Lanakila and Kamana have stated and Bonnie as well, in regards to what is preferred as far as restoration of the site in comparison to being able to have the least amount of impact possible to the Aina. So I want to echo that is absolutely important, and mahalo nui for being very conscious and cognizant about that. My question is in regards to, and can you speak to a little bit the decommissioned rubble? I do know that I saw the slide, but I guess my question is, the rubble, as you stated, goes to recycling and or landfills. Are those landfills local, or are those landfills off-site, off-island?
The landfills are local, and we've consulted with the West Hawaii landfill, I believe it's called, about the volume of material we'll be bringing, and check that that's acceptable. Let me remind you that the skin of the observatory, in fact, let me bring up the slide there. The metal skin there is all aluminum sheet that can be recycled. A lot of the steel can be recycled. There's a lot of copper wiring that can be recycled. So I think it's effectively basically the concrete foundation and the kind of internal wall furnishings, that type of thing, that are not recyclable. And that's what will go to landfill. But we do plan to recycle as much as is possible.
Thank you for that comment. Separate from those items that you've just stated, are there other types of decommission, rubble, and or liquids, and or anything else of that nature that would need a separate kind of type of care?
Okay, I see what you're headed at. So we already, there were various kind of the equivalent of household hazardous materials in the observatory from its use. That was already inventoried and removed in summer of last year. So there's also been a lead paint and mold abatement that was also done in September of last year as the initial step of deconstruction. And that followed the plan based on our hazardous materials plan that was already presented and approved by Mauna Kea Management Board. So at this point, the only remaining hazardous materials that we're aware of are there is lead paint on structural elements such as railings and beams. So we have a lead paint mitigation contractor who will be present during the deconstruction to properly deal with those pieces. And then, as I mentioned before, there will be sampling under the foundation once the foundation is removed. So you're aware from the EA and the site decommissioning plan that there was a hydraulic oil spill early on. And so we will look for any residue from that hydraulic oil spill once the foundation is removed. We will also sample under the cesspool, for any contaminants there. But there was no there was no disposal of any chemicals into the cesspool. The cesspool is used for just human waste. So we don't anticipate we'll find anything surprising there, but we will do that testing to check that.
Thank you so much for your comments and for sharing the detail. I think what I'd like to state is that it's commendable that you are open and so willing to share this information with us. I think, as Kamana has stated, that this is a historic effort and unprecedented for Mauna Kea and for Hawaii. And so I think all the steps that you voiced and shared, and all of those that are yet to come, and all of that will come of the decommissioning through the archaeological monitoring, the survey, the cultural monitor, invasive species monitor, hazard materials monitoring, I think it's essential. And mahalo nui for sharing. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I can't see everybody at once, so I gotta scroll through if anybody else speak up. Lanakila.
I just want to reiterate mahalo, Dr. Voila. And that, yeah, just want to kind of echo that this is very monumental and it's very important for the data, to collect the data in this process. That's going to be very essential, I know, for our work in the future for the management and also in decision making of any types of things coming and going from the Mauna, as this is setting precedents and setting an example. And just want to add on to, as you said, to, you know, that this is unlike any other decommissioning in the world. Hawaii this Mauna Kea is such a delicate ecosystem and such a delicate situation, and as you mentioned too, because of what the community expectation and the cultural perspective. But I would like to just add that it's also the legal, what's set within law, within conservation laws, that what is the expectations, and therefore was also the guidelines, which is important for us as we are in that role now that we carry on to uphold laws of conservation. That we now we have this template to look back at these things and what we have to deal with in the future, and for in that knowing that a lot of these things were built kind of even before PA requirements and stuff were even formed. So we're also having to just malama things that may not have been done correctly in the past, as it wasn't even set. So we're also in this taking on this responsibility in a time of transition. And environmental awareness, and so I just really commend your work, and the data collection to this is going to be imperative and important for the future care of the mountain. So mahalo.
Anyone else? Okay, if not, thank you very much, Dr. Bawala, for presenting and being so open and transparent. And thank you to Barbara Hastings, who helped facilitate this presentation.
Okay,
Right.
thank you for the opportunity. And obviously, if anybody has any questions, feel free to contact me afterward. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just offer a comment or something just for discussion on that? So
Sure.
I am just wondering how, we as an authority understand best practices in decommissioning, and it's fantastic. We'll have that, sort of documentation and stuff, but I'm not sure they'll have the sort of scale and scope that we would need in terms of decision makers for best practices and lessons learned. So I just want to leave that out there for us to kind of think about. It might be part of the procurement process when we're working with consultants, maybe to consider this, but yep.
No, great point. I mean, how are we going to use information that they gather, right? Is the point to do things better as we go forward. It's something that we got to. I don't have the answer to you right now, but I think you're right that either we got to staff up or bring people in with expertise that have the ability to kind of understand what the data is and then present it in a way that we understand so we can have input.
So, and real quick, because that's what I was wondering too while I was listening, is these conversations have never been had before. Like there haven't been informative conversations like this with experts, because there's 1,000 pages of reporting already on their website. What's informing any of that? Like, did they make the process up and start from scratch?
It sounds like they had to start from scratch, but then their proposal has to be approved by the Board of Land, and I'm sure it has to be approved somehow. And maybe Greg can address it. The Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship. I'm sure the University of Hawaii has to approve through that, and then the Board of Land and Natural Resources has to approve their plan because it involves impact to a conservation district.
It might be helpful for members of this group, and we can provide a link to familiarize with the decommissioning plan process and all the steps that need to be followed, who has to approve at which point. There is a process that was, I believe Greg can correct me on this, but again, approved by the land board. But this group, the authority, we may want to change that process, add to that process, revise that process. But I don't think we have to start from scratch unless folks really want to, because there's been a fair amount of work done here. But
Wow.
each telescope is different. And so it's gonna, you know, everyone is gonna look a little bit different going through the process, but the process remains the same.
Would it be possible for us to have access to the experts that inform the primary process?
Probably. I'm not sure who they are, but yeah.
Okay. I think that's what more of my question was targeting.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good points all around. Further comments on this particular matter? Questions?
I'm sorry, I don't know if you mentioned the exact dates or where could we find the dates when these things are going to take place? I think just for myself, my first thought is that there should be, of course, with the public thing, I know for a lot of us practitioners, with such a impactful movement about to take place, I know ceremony is something that's most likely going to want to be observed. So,
Barbara, do you know what the exact dates are, or are those in flux?
or where we can get that.
You gotta unmute Barbara.
Sorry. No, we don't know the exact dates. We issued a press release giving kind of a broad thing because we felt that we needed to get word out that this is going to happen, and it's going to happen, we hope, soon. But the dates keep moving as we wait for this permit or that. And so we're hoping to have final dates and everything. Please know, and I'm sorry I can't cite the URL, but we are posting everything on the website, and we can certainly get that information to you. There's more than you ever want to know there. So yes, just speaking from my point of view, working with CSO on this project has been long and arduous. We've been in it since 2015, but these guys have been just so cautious and so careful because they really truly want to do it right.
Okay. So we'll keep people posted as best we can in terms of the specific dates. Part of what I'm trying to do is to make sure that members of the authority get information either contemporaneously or before public, so that you guys are equipped to answer questions that might come to you from members of the public, right? So I'm trying to make a conscious attempt to get that information to you guys as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's my only suggestion as well too, as when those dates do arrive, that there is at least a clear amount of time for community and practitioners to be able to prepare for ceremonies, most likely that would be intended.
Okay. Point well taken. Okay.
Aloha. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Barbara.
Uh,
On a related, during this, still in the chair's report, and a related matter, I sent all of you a lot of documentation this morning dealing with the Hokukea decommissioning. I learned yesterday that the Hokukea decommissioning plan is up before the Board of Land and Natural Resources tomorrow morning. So I sent to all of you this morning, which was presented to me yesterday, a copy of the evaluation of what they're doing and what their recommendations are, which are going to be presented to the board. I also presented to you this morning copies of the testimony of the Ahamoku, who are requesting that the building that they defer this process at this point, and with the idea that the Hokukea building would be somehow donated to the authority to create an educational facility and or a sort of like a respite area for kupuna up at the summit. That request was made. I'm not sure if it was made to the UH. I have to reread the documentation to the UH and to the Department of Land and Natural Resources back in 2019, I believe. So they're asking for the Board of Land and Natural Resources to defer consideration of the permit. So we're sort of caught between this idea that we want decommissioning to occur as soon as possible, but with an idea that Ahomoku has raised. So at this point, having not had the chance to really fully consider this, I don't know that we're ready without people having a time to read through the documentation, as well as having a discussion on it, that we'll be ready to kind of weigh in by tomorrow morning. So anyway, but just give that, I just learned, like I said, I just learned about the hearing yesterday, and then the Ahomoku position. So a lot of documentation this morning, but take a look at it, and we'll probably have to have some discussion about position that we want to take about that in the near future. Okay. Last thing, in terms of the chair's report, is that I wanted to congratulate all of you who have been confirmed, at least through the Water Land Committee. They made a mistake and confirmed me yesterday too. So all of us have passed through. I'm waiting to hear from them. You know, the next process is that it goes to a floor vote of the entire Senate. I'm waiting for them. What we were told at one of the hearings is that they want to have a date where all of us are voted on at the same time. So I'm trying to get as soon as possible what they view that particular date to be. So anyway, and I'll let you guys know as soon as that happens, but congratulations. I always try to think to myself, okay, now what have I got myself into? But I'm excited and optimistic that we're going to do a lot of great things. So I'm glad that everybody got confirmed. With that, I want to go into the governance issue. And
Can I just say something, Chair, on that? I just want to
Sure.
mahalo you, Chair and Vice Chair Noinoe Wong Wilson, for attending the hearings and just being there to support all of us going through that process. Turned out was really smooth, but there was a lot of uncertainties, I think. So thank you for your leadership and being there to support us.
thank you. I view us.
Mahalo.
I view us as one. I don't like to use the Ilani thing, but we're one team. We're a team, so we gotta support each other. Even though we may disagree about stuff, we're still one team, and we gotta act as a team. And that's kind of my philosophy. Teams can disagree, but we're one team. Okay, thank you for your kind comments. With that, I want.
Chair, you just went on mute by accident, I think.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Rich Matsuda to sort of address this idea about ratifying prior votes based upon our internal rules that we set for ourselves. For Rich.
Yeah, okay, I guess I'll start by making a motion to ratify all prior decisions made by this board prior to today in accordance with the document that we have adopted at the last meeting. The document is the rules of procedure and organization of the board of directors of the Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority. Examples of decisions we've made in the past, for example, were formation of the permitted interaction groups. These are well captured in the minutes. It's just that we need to ratify these decisions in accordance with how we made our rules that we adopted last time. So that's my motion, is to ratify prior decisions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions? Is more procedural matter than a substantive matter. We're just saying that we agree with everything that we did before. Yeah. So any further discussion? If not, all in favor, raise your hand.
Wait, you gotta get a second.
Oh, did Doug seconded.
Oh, Doug, sorry, okay.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. So the next thing is on administration. I've asked Rich Matsuda, Kalehua, and Pomai to sit to help us narrow down the field in terms of an executive assistant, and they've been meeting several times, asked additional questions of the potential candidates. But I just thought that they would make a good group. So anyway, I'm not sure how to go about this, because it's something very unusual. You don't usually have a board hiring an executive assistant. So I'm not sure that we actually have to vote on this, because they're not actually they're gonna make a recommendation to all of you as to the candidate they think is best suited. So they're sort of a screening committee. So I don't know specifically whether or not we have to vote on it. We framed it as a vote. But anyway, I've asked the three, and like they're well on their way and should be presenting to us shortly the candidate that they feel is most appropriate. So anyway, I'm gonna take the chair's prerogative and not have a vote on it unless somebody thinks that we need to vote on this committee. With that, thank you. I'm gonna ask Rich to sort of tell us where exactly they are.
Okay, I'll keep it brief and then invite Kalehua and Pomai to add in here, but we've had 9 applicants. We had to request more information. So as we gathered the initial pool of candidates, we realized that the application material didn't really help us determine who we should interview. It's just had to do with the way the form was. And so we went back out to request more information on that. And based on the information that we received, we're going to be interviewing 3 candidates next week and the following week. So we have days and times arranged for that. I'd like to make it clear that the position is open until filled. So we continue to accept applications for the position, but we will proceed with the first 3 interviews. DLNR HR office has been assisting, so receiving these applications and then sending them on to us, and been very helpful. So I want to thank them, and then also thank Pomai and Kalehua for, we've had good discussions about how to go about this in a very consistent and fair manner. And so I've really appreciated the discussions that the 3 of us have had. But that's the short of it. I invite Pomai and Kalehua, please jump in if you have things to add here.
No, thank you. Just wanted to make sure, we thank you, Rich, for the work you're putting in, the coordination to get us together and have these conversations. And, just specifically that we, spent a lot of time trying to think about what other information we wanted from the candidates, because it seemed like the initial ask of the application brought a pool together, and when we get a larger pool, we added another step for a little bit more information, a little deeper dive into the applicants to help the screening process along. And then we talked a little bit more about the specific interview questions that we want to ask. So it seems like we're ready to go for the next couple of weeks. And thank you, Rich, for coordinating that. Appreciate it.
I too would like to offer my my gratitude and my thanks to both Rich and to Kalehua. This is a team that is very wise in the way in which for us to go about this. And so the layers and the mechanisms that we are putting in place are definitely in alignment with our intentions and the goal of moving forward. So mahalo, mahalo, mahalo.
Yep, that's it, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the committee? If not, the next subject is hiring of consultants. So Wes Machida and I went and met with the DLNR people in charge of procurement to understand what the process is. And they've made some suggestions about the process. But one of the unusual things that came up is that to institute the process, you need a selection committee. There is a state rule that says that deputy directors and other appointed individuals cannot serve on the selection committee. The original interpretation was that no one on this authority, having been appointed, could serve on this committee, which kind of didn't make sense to me. So what happened is that West Machida then went and put in an inquiry to the state chief procurement officer. And her interpretation is that neither the chair nor the vice chairs of this authority can serve on this committee, this procurement committee. I'm not quite sure what the rationale is for that. Having said that, we just gonna go and proceed ahead because it's the most expeditious way. So I've asked 3 people to sit on this committee. I've asked Doug Adams to chair the committee. I've asked Kamana and Beamer to be a part of the committee. And the third person who I've asked who's been instrumental is West Machida. All of you, I don't know if all of you have had the chance to meet West, but West has been very helpful in kind of pushing us through some of the state requirements and asking the right questions and having access to the right people to ask the right questions. So I've asked the 3 of them to serve on this committee to try to figure out how we hire these consultants as soon as possible. So more to come on that as they get formed and proceed along. Next item is finance. My understanding is that the Senate Ways and Means Committee issued their budget 2 Fridays ago, publicly issued their budget, and that our request for $14 million has remained within their budget, and that our request for the 5 state employees positions remains within the budget. So far, so good. We continue to monitor where we are and answer any questions that they might have. We need to, I know that it's a soft budget, but in the last meeting that we had, our permitted interaction group presented a broad budget for us to approve. So that's something that we need a vote on to approve that budget. A lot of our budget is contingencies, but also it provides us flexibility in terms of how fast we proceed and what exactly happens. So Dr. Wong Wilson is not here today. She had some personal matters that she had to attend to. She apologizes and expresses her regret in not being able to attend today's meeting, but she's in alignment with getting the vote. So if I could get a motion to approve the budget as presented by the permitted interaction group.
So moved.
Second. Okay, any discussion, any questions? Not all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Operational update, legislative update. I forget where we were, but that Senate Bill 81, which would have inserted the Department of Land and Natural Resources as part of our decision-making process, has been tabled for now. So it's not moving forward. Other than the budget and your confirmations, doesn't seem to be other legislative matters that directly impact us at this point. So the main thing right now is to make sure that our budget goes through. I don't know if anybody else has any comment on the legislative process. If not, so I think that this is the title of this is called Operational Update. I think that it's probably a good process for us to hear from the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship on a monthly basis, so that we get updated in terms of what they're doing. So Greg and I have talked about the fact that he would be presenting to all of you sort of an update about what they're doing, some of the challenges, some of the accomplishments that they've had during the upcoming months. So this would be our first kind of regularly scheduled updates by the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship. And then, whatever questions you guys might have, or if you have concerns, you can raise them to Greg during this portion of the meeting. So with that, Greg has to hook in, he's hooking in right now directly so he can update us.
I will share screen. Okay. Hello, Kako. Thank you, everyone. I put together a few slides just to provide a brief update, as Chair Komeiji has indicated, requested as a regular item on your board meetings. I'll be talking a little bit about some of the things that are going on that we're working on in the plan. Hello, Kako. Thank you, everyone. Okay, is that better? Okay. I'll be updating you on some of the things that we've been working on in our planning and permitting work, our stewardship programming, community engagement, and some of the activities on the Mauna that we collectively group under what we call our shared services program. So first up is on the planning and permitting side of the house. As I've mentioned before, the comprehensive management plan update that was prepared and approved by the land board in July of last year. There had been a contested case request filed by a Miss Laulani Teal upon their approval of the CMP supplement. So she filed her appeal in August of 2022, within the period that she needed to file her written request for that contested case. And then shortly thereafter, they also filed a notice of appeal with the Hawaii Supreme Court, even though the land board had not made a decision on her request for the contested case. And so everything was sort of on pause until the Supreme Court made a decision on her appeal. They issued their appeal in February of this year, and essentially dismissing her appeal because of what they cited as a lack of their jurisdiction over this particular subject matter. And then in March, on March 24th, the land board issued their decision to deny the request. The basic reasoning for the denial in layman's terms is that it's been deemed that a management plan is not a process or a regulatory action that grants a land use permit or a property right permit to the university. And so under Chapter 91, which governs contested cases, that kind of decision-making is not subject to a contested case. So that was a basic legal reasoning. We expect Ms. Teal will appeal this decision in some form or fashion. I raise this here not only because it's something that we've been working on, but it's a sort of decision and issue that I think will present itself to the authority in the future as you folks make decisions about your own management plans as well as your administrative rules.
So it's something to just, I think, consult with your attorney on, your attorney general, and make sure, you're well aware of sort of all of the context and reasoning behind some of this stuff. Oh, okay. Hang on a second. Okay, now turn on my speaker.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that all right? Any questions on this particular matter? If not, I'll move on. I was going to talk a little bit about decommissioning, but I think you folks have had a nice review of the Caltech decommissioning process and where they stand. On the Hoku Kea side, as Chair Komeiji indicated, the land board will be taking up our conservation district use application for that decommissioning tomorrow. There has been testimony, as he shared with you folks, by Ahamoku to defer that decision. I want to make a couple of comments based on some of the questions that you folks were discussing when you were discussing the decommissioning. One comment is relative to the lessons learned that Director Beamer asked about. The way the decommissioning process works is that the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship is really kind of the central point. And so as the applicant, in this case, either Caltech Submillimeter Observatory, or in the case of Hoku Kea, the University of Hawaii at Hilo, as they work through that process, we are really the ones that are sitting there with their project teams, as a part of their project teams, developing their plans, vetting their plans against our own management plans that they have to comply with. And so the lessons learned are sort of being transmitted real time as we're working with them. As Dr. Gowala indicated, there really hasn't been a decommissioning on Mauna Kea in the past. So this is really the first two that we're working through. So the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship has played that a central role in that whole process. Another point of interest or information is that during the actual decommissioning process, each project team has their own project manager, project team working on their decommissioning. But in addition to that, the Center for Mauna Kea Stewardship has on-site construction manager as well, our own independent construction manager. So we have the authority to stop construction or stop the process as well. So there are multiple layers or levels, if you will, in the management and oversight of a project like this. Despite the fact that these are the first two, one of the reasons why things are moving so slowly is that because we have these multiple layers of oversight. Another point of information is regarding the request by Ahamoku to defer judgment on the Hoku Kea decommissioning. The issue that they have raised in the past that we've had many discussions about has to do with designation of a site on the summit or in the summit region that can be used for public and as well as cultural practitioners as a place to prepare for ceremony, as a place to get out of the weather, as a restroom facility, that sort of thing. that idea is something the university has always been open to. And in fact, that idea is commemorated in the TMT Conservation District Use Permit as one of the conditions that the university would work with Kahuku and other cultural groups in trying to identify an appropriate place to serve that function on the summit. So that's something that I think warrants and deserves further discussion and exploration for sure. In the case of Hoku Kea, this building is very, very small, and it wouldn't, in our opinion, sort of be the right place to provide to the community, if you will, the kind of facility that is being requested. But there are other options, obviously. But that's something I think the board, the authority will have to take up as you consider your own framework for astronomy going forward, and the Mauna. The other thing I want to just share with you, there was a question about the process for decommissioning. There is a decommissioning subplan that is part of our comprehensive management plan that was developed and approved in 2010. This is just a high-level overview of what that process looks like. Some of this is dated now, obviously, because names have changed and roles have changed somewhat, but it is still the structure of the process that we follow. In addition to this, before a project even gets, a decommissioning project gets into this process, there's actually a higher level process when a project is brought forward that has to, that they have to go through before it's deemed to be ready to even get into this level of management, if you will. So as Chancellor Irwin indicated, there is a process that is followed, and it's quite complicated. Moving on, wanted to update you folks on the status of the UH-88 situation. They have finalized their plan to upgrade their coolant system to transition to propylene glycol, which is a much safer substance. They have secured quotes for that transition and re-engineering of the system. They're documenting the plan and the safety procedures now, and those are being prepared for review by our University of Hawaii Environmental Health and Safety Office, as well as eventually the Department of Health. The system remains off and will stay that way until the conversion occurs. Also, I notified Chair Komeiji the other day. We were notified by Subaru that they discovered on April 6th a leak of, again, ethylene glycol within their facility. The leak occurred from a small piece of equipment, or a piece of equipment that's used to pressurize the mirrors when they're handling and moving the mirrors. This particular piece of equipment had not been operational or turned on since July of last year. The cause appears to be a faulty O-ring in the filter. It's estimated since the time that it was last operated that about 6 liters of fluid were released in the building over an 8-month period. There is no indication that any of the spilled fluid reached the environment or the soil. It's all contained within the facility. In an abundance of caution, even though the material did not reach the external environment, they did, on our advice, notify the Department of Health, and they're preparing their written report to the Department of Health as required by Department of Health rules. So we're working closely with them and monitoring that as well. A couple of other things on the planning and permitting side of the house. April 4th, Chair Komeiji, myself, Land Division Administrator Russell Suji, and OCCL Administrator Michael Kane, and various staff members, along with our respective attorney generals and general counsel from UH, met to have a preliminary discussion on the transfer of UH leases and permits to the authority. As a reminder, there are two leases, general leases that the university holds, one for the Mauna Kea Science Reserve, the other for Halepohaku. And then we also have a right of easement for the roadway corridor. In addition to that, there are 18 conservation district use permits and numerous site plan approvals that have been obtained over the years. And most of them, well, the CDPs for sure, all have associated Chapter 343, excuse me, I have a typo there, environmental reviews, all of which contain various conditions that have to be complied with. We were not clear on exactly what the nuts and bolts process is involved in transferring these leases and permits to the authority. We needed to have a meeting to begin that discussion. We recognize, and Chair Komeiji made the point that the authority is not in a position at this time to take over anything, but the steps that will be required to actually effectuate these things is going to have to be worked into or developed into, integrated into your transition plan, your project plan, if you will, once you secure your project manager consultant. So we wanted to begin that process, make sure we understand the steps involved. There's some homework or work that I will be doing following up from this to try to begin to organize what we understand that the steps might be. And the other thing, just to note, CMS is conducting right now, we're in the middle of our annual facility inspections. We inspect all of the facilities, Mauna Kea observatories, for compliance with their sublease terms, as well as with their conservation district use permits conditions. So that happens on an annual basis, and that's in process now. On the stewardship side of the house, building off our successful propagation and partnership with DLNR of our Hina Hina program or Silver Sword, there is a outplanting set for April 20th in collaboration with DLNR that will occur in a fenced off area off of R1 on DLNR property. We're really excited about that. DLNR is really excited about that. We've had just a tremendous amount of success with the propagation of Hina Hina up in our greenhouse. We hosted the Bonner program, which is a UH Hilo leadership development program. I'll talk a little bit more about that next, but they helped us to reestablish the area and weed the area that is intended for further outplanting. On March 18th, we hosted a group of 37 volunteers, including the Bonner students, and pulled a little over 1,700 pounds of weeds in that one day, of invasives in that one day. Since I think at the beginning of this year, we are now up to, or no, excuse me, since I think second quarter of the fiscal year, we have 91 native plants that we've outplanted in the weeded area, and 90 new momane have germinated in the greenhouse. So that program is coming along nicely. Just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the Bonner program. This is a kind of thing that CMS has been really, really interested in expanding and getting into, supporting other educational endeavors with the university and quite frankly with the community. This is a program that targets students at UH Hilo who are in need of financial assistance, who may otherwise not be successful or make it through their collegiate experience. They actually get paid an internship, a stipend, to work 8 to 10 hours a week. One of the major events that they have every year is during spring break is a retreat, if you will. This year they asked if they could come to Mauna Kea, stay for 3 days and help our stewardship team, our resource management team, with some of the work that needed to be done in the field. In support of that, we also surrounded them with a number of different opportunities to engage with others who to learn about the cultural significance and historic significance of Mauna Kea, the natural resources, astronomy, the full overview of some of the controversy around Mauna Kea, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just a reflection of one of the students' experiences there. We were really pleased with it being a good experience for everyone. On our community engagement side of the house, we are reinstituting on a very small, limited basis our stargazing program at the Visitor Information Station. Unlike in years past, this is being done by reservation with a maximum of 30 people per event. It is sponsored and facilitated and managed in collaboration with a group of local amateur astronomers. And we're looking to develop partnerships with local schools and cultural practitioners to expand sort of the curriculum and the programming, if you will, of that program. So this is something we're just experimenting with. It was such a popular event in the past. It got too popular. It was exceeding capacity of the visitor information station, so we had to shut it down. But we've always wanted to reinstitute it on a pilot basis, and it's required getting in place a reservation system and a number of other things. But finally, we're at that point where we can begin to pilot it. Then on the shared
Greg,
service. Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, just a quick question about that program. How was it prior? Was it just kind of open for whoever came up the mountain? Was that how it was before?
Yeah, it was just open, and anybody from the public just came on the nights that they had stargazing, and astronomers, local amateur astronomers, would set up their telescopes, and it was kind of a catch as catch can, free for all.
Okay, and then just wondering if there's been any notice that even just the fact of that there's a designated limit of people for this. Have you noticed if was a decline in just the number of people coming up in general in the evenings, or has that been noticed at all?
No, we instituted that because we wanted to manage capacity. So we actually haven't done any advertisement for it. We've held one pilot effort last month that was on an invitation basis only. We're planning to hold another one. I can't remember if it's the end of this month or the beginning of next month. And we're not planning on advertising, but just by word of mouth already, that event has been full. It's maxed out already. So we're going to take it really, really slow.
But just in terms of if they would noticed a reservation concept in the future that just has an effect on the general public accessing in the evenings, because I know that was the capacity before. It was just whoever was there. Yeah. If it had if it's coagulate.
Yeah, no,
have an effect on the number.
Yeah, this reservation system is just for this program. Otherwise, the viz and road access remains open as it normally is, as long as conditions permit. So on the shared services side of the house, for the last quarter, the real story is that winter weather has dominated the story. Managing public access when in the kind of conditions that we've had has been a bit of a challenge. but it's also been an increased safety issue for our staff as well. The photo on the right gives you an idea of sort of over time, the level of drifts that have developed and packed. That roadway is a roadway that connects the IRTF to the UKIRT facility. It's kind of a alternative route to get to the summit. And you can see there, I know in some places the snow drifts have been as high as 10 feet. So that's been a real challenge to keep that roadway open. On March 2nd, I drove into the parking lot at Halepuaku, and that picture at the top left, that's what was the conditions there. So snow has come much further down than in years past. Presumably due to climate change, we're not sure, but something that will have to be monitored closely. And then, of course, with the weather conditions, we are having to turn away more vehicles because of concerns around invasive species and whatnot. Our management plan and rules allow us to inspect vehicles for that when they're dirty like this here, and ask them to turn around and go and clean up. So just a number of sort of challenges that the weather presents. And it also reflects, interestingly, in vehicle counts. So what you see here, and I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to really clean this up to make it more legible, readable. The blue bars reflect vehicles, public, resident and non-resident vehicles, private cars. And that data is scaled to the axis on the left. The red line is commercial tour operators, or what we call CTOs, and that data is scaled to the axis on the right. So you see, since the beginning of the fiscal year in July of last year through April, I think this was Tuesday of this week or something like that, the traffic counts. And you see that they not unusual. Traffic counts go way up typically when there is snow, particularly during the Christmas holidays. That's not unusual. And then it starts to drop off. And that's despite even with the severe weather that we've had. So it's something, traffic is something that we monitor closely for a variety of different reasons, not the least of which is ensuring safety as well as the resources are being stewarded properly. So that completes my report. Any questions?
All right.
Could I just ask?
Go ahead.
Just a general, concept. So, kind of going back up to the contested case with Auntie Laulani Teal. I just wanted to get a little clarity on that, because of course that was something that became very loud, or was a prominent thing in our community. And so I just wanted to get a little clarification, and I understand the process there, but and I know that as that was just a general plan put forward, is the university, and this is also a question for us, in this transitional period, is those rules or management going to be pursued by the university to put into any effect any of those possible things within this 5-year process? Or is that just going to, because I know that was put together prior to the creation of the authority. So is the university planning to try and move forward with any authorizing or implementation of said processes? Or is it just going to sit there as a template? And then for us as the authority to actually then, we have to set up our management thing, and if we want to tap off of that in any way. So I'm just kind of wondering where is that going to go right now?
My understanding is that during the transition period, that management plan stays in place. The university's management plan stays in place. We will have to develop our own management plan. which will take effect upon the transition. Whether we adopt some, none, or all of the university plan is something for us to decide in the future. But as the mountain needs to continue to be managed, even during the transition plan, they will have to continue to do that. There are some limitations about what the university can do during the transition in terms of issuing leases, et cetera. That basically precludes them from issuing new leases to observatories, et cetera. But at some point, we got to get going as an authority to figure out how we're going to address creating a management plan is going to take some time, right? And the philosophy that we're going to employ. So that's one of the things that, for me, getting this project management person involved, so we can start sequencing and then figuring out how we're going to do this, what kind of staffing we're going to need to do it, because trying to staff this with authority members doesn't make sense to me. So anyway,
And that's why I raised that. Yeah, I raised that question too, and maybe this more to Greg and Bonnie, perhaps too, as far on the university. And I know some of the red flags that got the community very heated and concerned were things like that. That's just recommendations or of possibilities that was within the management plan. Things like gates going up on the road and limitation or a process of practitioner having to make requests and request permits for access and stuff like that. So those were things that were in that caused a bit of an uproar. So I guess my general question is that and the other thing to just do that is that we have had incidences that we've talked about before where some of these things being brought to light and being thrown to the community was also that the authority was being blamed for such things. So that's why I kind of want to make the clear distinction that, as we're in co-management right now, that certain things that have been set up by the university, even if they're in a plan right now, it's a big red flag for community. So that's my question being is there plans on the university's ends at all to try and enforce some of these things, like to beyond where the what currently stands right now, that could create implications or concerns in the community that, like my position, a lot of people come to me and ask me what's going on when they see these things, and so I want to try to get some clarification to that, so how we move forward, especially in the community's eye.
Well, a couple of responses, Lanakila. The issue you raise about co-management, I think, is something that is front and center for the university. I don't think Act 255, either for the university or you folks, for the authority, clearly gives guidance on what that's supposed to mean. And I think that is a conversation that CMS and the authority, UH and the authority, I think, need to be having on an ongoing basis. Exactly what does that mean? And so that's one part of it, how I would respond. Regarding anything specific in the management plan, there are a lot of things that we've wanted to do and talked about doing. And in some cases, given the situation that we're in this co-management role, it wouldn't make sense for us to move forward to. There are, however, other things that are currently conditions of permits that puts us in a difficult position if we do not move forward with. So, an example I'll be dealing with tomorrow is this request to defer any decision on a decommissioning of Hoku Kea. That's a condition of a permit that we have committed to. So I don't think there's a clear line on sort of nothing comes forward, certain or everything comes forward. I think it's really something that we have to, between our two bodies, have to engage in conversation around and really make sure we really understand and talk those things through.
Yeah, so from my standpoint, that's one of the main issues that I've flagged from the beginning, right? As we, first of all, I don't believe that we have this co-management until July 1st. Okay, so whatever happening now is what, but as we move forward, what actions or decisions of CMS do they have to get our agreement on? And what happens if we don't agree? That's all not spelled out, and is there, do they have more power than us, and they can say, well, we take whatever you say, we're gonna do them. We have more power than them, said, no, stop, you cannot do it. Those are things that we're gonna have to, and what do they have to bring day-to-day issues to us to agree on? Or what's the level of what kind of things have to be presented to us? Those are all things that we're gonna have to flesh out and have, as Greg said, discussions with the UH in terms of how that happens, right? And then on top of that, with Laura here, the DLNR has some position as it relates to some of the conservation type issues. So all of that is not clearly set out, and it's something that we have to kind of talk through and maybe jointly or separately put in clarifying legislation at the next legislature, as we, because part of what we're doing now is sort of trying to understand all of these issues, understand the operations, understand where things may not we may not be in agreement with and stuff like that, right? But how we develop those processes is what we're trying to do now by educating people. So I don't know if that, Mauna Kea, that answers your question, but that is that's a big that's a big
Yeah, we have
question that we're gonna have to figure out.
create that mechanism of communication. I think I just know on my end and represent what my role on the representing community and cultural practitioners as well too. I would really just put that request and caution out there too, especially anything that would affect access and stuff like that too. Definitely should be things that need to be brought here prior, because those were the biggest concerns that I got a lot of calls about in seeing it inside the management plan. So
Right.
so we can.
The first step is communication. That's one reason why I thought that having these monthly updates about things that are coming up, so that we are advised and kind of that communication is the first step. Yeah, that we know that, and then, like I said, that's one of the reasons for requesting to have a monthly update, and maybe even Laura, from your side, we might start having kind of monthly updates from DLNR so that we are all on the same page and know what issues are coming up, and we can weigh in if necessary, right?
Chair, could I ask, I think this is a really important conversation, and like you said, it probably will take several iterations for us to understand. One, perhaps one thing is, Greg, you sort of mentioned these almost like two tiers. One tier where you felt it was obligatory of the Mauna Kea Center to achieve certain management goals that are aligned to requirements and permits. And then I think there's these other sort of more strategic management issues. And I'm hearing from Lanakila, the gates and anything that deals with access, I think is very important to this authority right now. So I'm wondering, Chair and Greg, if maybe a future presentation could sort of include that metrics. What are the things that you consider based off of the existing permits that are requirements that need to be accomplished? And that might give us a better idea of, sort of how we approach, these issues and moving forward. And then we can be informed, like Lanakila was saying, with community around what's happening and what's required by a permit versus what's a strategic management decision of the authority that I think, we particularly need to be involved in. I'm not sure, you have thoughts on that, Greg or Chair?
I think that what you're requesting is possible. I think it would end up being not quite as clear cut in all cases, sort of what is something that we absolutely need to comply with. I think there's still even going to be some gray areas in some of that stuff. And a lot of the answers to whether anything moves forward are integrally also tied to some of the work that you folks need to do, particularly around your management plan and your rules. So, you know, I know that.
Maybe Greg, we can start with, you guys can give I know that you guys keep track of all of the required things that you guys have to do. And one of the questions is, once we take over, are we required to abide by those requirements also? So anyway, maybe an inventory of what you would consider the significant requirements that you guys believe that you are required to do, either by way of permit or by some type of authorization by someone. Might be a start to at least start the discussion, and we can get, you know, further into that. But if we need more granular information, we can ask for that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question, Greg. So appreciate your comments on, you know, the decommissioning processes and the sort of diagrams and flow charts. And then mentioning that, you know, you folks have a person on site that can sort of stop construction or deconstruction in any process. Alongside that, Greg, is it in your plan to come up with the best practices, you know, sort of lessons learned evaluation? Because I think it's certainly one thing to say, you know, wait, this isn't working, stop. But I mean, on sort of an overall assessment of the process, I think that would be really helpful. Maybe folks are already going in that direction, but just a little more clarity on that would be helpful.
Yeah, you know, it's a really good point, Kamana. Couple of things in the 2022 CMP supplement that Land Board approved last year. That does reflect some of the lessons learned just in general of management process that was in the 2009 CMP. So some of that is already been baked in. Relative to decommissioning specifically, the process doesn't call for the kind of thing that you're talking about, but I think that that's a really good idea. And, you know, our office certainly is in the position to be able to capture that kind of information. So I like that idea, and we'll take a look at how we can make sure we're documenting our lessons learned. Again, this is the first time any facilities have been decommissioned. So we're actually, even though we have a process, we're figuring things out as we go along to some extent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Greg. I think, you know, it might be really important. I mean, we all understand, you know, there's plans to build a house, and then there's the actual building of the house, and we learn so much in that process. So I think, yeah, now that you're doing decommissioning, it would be really beneficial to have someone, you know, sort of compile that at the end, since it's never happened before, to learn from. So mahalo for taking that up, Greg.
Yep. I do and just another point of information and relative to decommissioning and the process, because it gets real complicated. So let's take CSO as an example. So Caltech is the entity this is their project, they're managing it, they've got the permit. According to our process, you know, they have their own project team with their own project manager. But as part of the decommissioning subplan, they're required to actually hire what's called, you heard Sunil refer to it, an independent construction monitor. So they actually have to hire someone who's not actually their project manager to oversee and ensure that they're complying not just with BMPs, but our rules and our plans and everything. And then in addition to that, CMS has our own independent construction or project oversight function as well. So you kind of have it at 3 levels, even within a single project.
Doug,
Chair, thank you. This has been such a substantive conversation. I apologize that I'm going to now go into weeds real quick. First of all, for the CSO, I appreciated seeing the transit from Mauna Kea to Kavaihai, and I noticed that it's along Waikoloa Road. And I assume for sure that there's conversations between the project team and our director of Department of Public Works. But beginning in May, we're supposed to have work being done on Waikoloa Road. So perhaps just check in and make sure that those guys are talking and they're aware of that. The other two things are really questions for our attorney. I know that you're there, Peggy. First of all, and let me know if this is something we should do in executive session. I note that the update here by Greg was not included as a part of the documents, right, that we received that were put in. So are we able to classify that as testimony? That's a part of the update. I'm just wondering, how do we manage that? Because I don't want folks to say, hey, you didn't include stuff at the beginning.
Yeah, Doug, I would recommend that we go through and review in executive session.
Okay, great.
But I appreciate that question.
I'll save the second question then for executive session as well. Thank you.
okay. Any further questions for Greg on the update? If not, if we could get a motion to go into executive session and we could follow the wording as set forth in the agenda, that would be.
Could I just ask one question before we jump in?
Sure.
Here? So
Fine.
Doug, is your question that in Greg's update, not all of his PowerPoint was included in the attachment? Is that, I'm trying to figure out what.
Yeah, none of the PowerPoint was included in the stuff that was included as a part of the agenda. So none of it was there.
I see, but it was an agenda item. So you're just wondering how we include those.
We'll have a conversation about that, right?
Okay, okay. Thanks.
All right, so could I get a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session to consult with the MKSOA's attorney on questions and issues pertaining to the authority's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities pursuant to HRS section 92-5A4 regarding proposed legislation, governance, administration, and finance.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So you guys are gonna put us in a separate room. Thank you. Okay. I think everybody's back. We figured out that you press the leave room button. That's probably what we gotta do. So thank you for everybody. Thank you for spending the time today. I think this was a great meeting. Maybe not too much answers, but we have a better understanding of some of the complexities of what our charges are and what we're gonna do, and how a lot of the interdependencies upon if we make a decision in one area impacts on other areas, etc. So thanks everybody for really paying attention and really substantively adding to everything that we do. All right, any further announcements? We do have our next meeting scheduled for May 11th. If not, I don't know if we need a motion to adjourn, but this motion, the meeting is adjourned. Okay,
Yep, move to adjourn.
all right, second, all in favor. All right, thanks, everybody.
Mahalo kako. Aloha.
Um,